Welcome back. 14 new cases of the Zika virus in the United States are being investigated as possibly transmitted through sexual contact, raising more questions about the impact of the virus. We'll get to that in a bit. But first, a third straight victory for Donald Trump in the race for the White House has given the billionaire businessman new momentum on his path to his party's nomination. The election is getting heated. Let's have a listen from Thursday night's debate.
If he builds the wall the way he built Trump Towers, he'll be using illegal immigrant labor to do it. A lot of these positions that he's now taking are new to him.
When you say crazy zealot, are you talking about you?
If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now? Selling watches in Manhattan.
I know you're embarrassed. I know you're embarrassed. But keep fighting. Keep swinging, man. Swing for the fences.
This is another area on which Donald agrees with Hillary Clinton.
We got a lot of fun up here tonight, I have to tell you. Thank you for the book.
Donald, relax.
Go ahead. I'm relaxed. You're the basket case.
Did he just call him a basket case?
Indeed he did.
I'm sorry, but as a foreigner looking in, this is insane. What's going on, Richard?
Welcome to American political presidential elections. It doesn't get any better than this.
Or worse.
Or worse. I think it's hilarious and entertaining. And I think here's the thing. What Donald Trump has figured out is that we live in a new America, right? Because of reality television, because of social media, because of the 24-hour news cycle, this actually works for him. This builds what some would call momentum for him. And if you look at and I think, so as you're watching this, the two other guys, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, they're sort of vying to be the possible nominee. But right now, they're not winning. I mean, if you look at all the polls, right, even in Marco Rubio's home state of Florida, where he is the senator, he is behind almost 10 points to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has figured out how to tap into a group of voters, and he knows how to engage them, he knows how to empower them, and he knows how to get them out to the polls. These other two candidates, they have not figured that out yet, and that's why I think Donald Trump most likely will be the Republican nominee.
That was my next question. So he's going to be the nominee for the Republican Party of the White House?
Most likely, unless there is divine intervention, or we go to what some call a quote-unquote brokered convention, which is what I think all of us in the political game are like, yes, brokered convention, brokered convention. But for the Republican Party, a brokered convention could be devastating going into a general election against either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, when the Democrats will coalesce around a candidate in the next 30 to 60 days.
So we have Super Tuesday coming up, which is where 12 states and territories all vote at the same time. You think Donald Trump could basically just have it wrapped up by then?
Oh, I think he does. I think so. Ted Cruz in Super Tuesday, because of money, right? Ted Cruz will focus on trying to win Texas because he needs to get a win under his belt.
Home state.
Home state, right? Marco Rubio is going to strategically should plant himself in the state where he has the best likelihood of winning. Even in that case where Ted Cruz wins Texas and Marco Rubio picks whatever state he wants out of the 12 to go for, the other 10 are pretty much up for grabs, and in all of them, Donald Trump is up by anywhere in the neck of the woods from 5 to 10 to 15 to some places 20 points.
Okay, what about the other side? A bit more of a civil race, but we've got Hillary Clinton in the race for her life against Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's been a lot closer than people thought. Is she likely to wrap up the nomination Super Tuesday?
No, I think this will go past Super Tuesday for the Clinton campaign. And the reason why is because Hillary Clinton is, and I think what she sort of rejiggered her campaign a little bit. You see her changing from the I, me, to we, us. And that is what Bernie Sanders has sort of pushed her to do. And Bernie Sanders has pushed her.
And she's been campaigning, on the ground a lot.
Exactly. She's been on the ground, and she's been pushed to the left by Bernie Sanders. Because what Bernie Sanders has done is he's tapped into the aspiration of younger people. He's tapped into the aspiration of working families. Hillary Clinton, there's no question that when she comes to Washington, she's going to be able to get the job done. What she's got to do on the campaign trail is show Democratic voters that she feels their pain and she cares about them. And that's what she's discovering once again, as she didn't do in 2008. This time, I think she's going to get it done.
A Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump matchup for the general would be a journalist's dream, but I don't know about America. I want to get everyone else's opinion on this because this is truly getting global attention. Simon Cowie in Brazil, you talked about domestic problems in Brazil, but they must be looking at the American election going, what's going on?
Well, absolutely. There's actually quite a lot of support, especially on Brazilian social media, for Bernie Sanders at the moment. There's less criticism of Trump online, but there's definitely a lot of support for Bernie Sanders. And
is that because of his socialist?
It's mainly on social media at the moment.
Is it mainly because of his socialist ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are making comparisons with Lula, the former president of Brazil, who was the first working-class president of Brazil. And yeah, there's a lot of traction on social media talking good stuff about Bernie Sanders, less bad stuff about Mr. Trump, which I've seen on English and American social media, and less mocking memes, this kind of thing. But there's a lot of positive traction about Mr. Sanders online in Brazilian social media, totally.
Cristina Escobar in Havana. I know it's not really shown American media in Havana, but I also know that everyone watches it. What's the view in Havana?
Well, of course, all of this that you were talking about the elections is being watched very closely in Cuba, taking into consideration that we care even more than before who's going to win and who's going to be in the White House in January 2017. And what I've been seeing, and Cuban has a high political culture in this sense, and we've been watching the American politics for a while now, that there's quite a crisis that shows the fact that a man that like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, the extreme phases of a process of discontent towards the establishment, are actually ruling these at least liking of the people, of the polls. But the thing is that it looks like elections is more about who yells the most, who speaks faster, and who's more time on TV, and not about the essential stuff. And I've seen that even though Bernie Sanders questions some interesting ideas in the American politics scenario, Donald Trump doesn't know a lot of things about how the U.S. works or even the international community works, and he's actually ruling the polls. I think in any case, the best choice for the Cuban situation, for the path to normalization, would be a Democrat president. And even though Donald Trump is the only GOP candidate that has said that supports Barack Obama's policy about lifting the embargo, not because he knows a lot about it, but because he believes that the Cuba is an opportunity for business, and he's a businessman.
That's really interesting what you said, because the two other rivals of Donald Trump are Cuban Americans. Marco Rubio's parents came from Cuba. Ted Cruz's parents came from Cuba. I've never seen two Cuban in the race, and yet you reject them. Why?
It's quite an interesting question, because it's very interesting why the two Cubans are the ones that are against having normal relations between U.S. and Cuba. The two Cubans are the most that strongly oppose most to this, and it has to do with the fact that they represent a generation of Cubans that left in the 60s after the nationalization process of the revolution during the 60s. Nationalizations that are, by the way, now being discussed about the claims and about what Cuba should pay. By the way, what the U.S. should pay because of the damages of the embargo during all these years. But of course, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are the prodigal sons of this generation, even though none of them have been in Cuba and none of them know a thing about what's going on in Cuba. Marco Rubio shows that he doesn't know what's going on in Cuba. Marco Rubio is more related to Florida because he's from Florida, but in any case, and this is quite interesting, he doesn't represent the majority of the Cuban Americans in Florida, taking into consideration that according to every poll, the Cuban Americans are in favor of lifting the embargo and in favor of normalization. So Marco Rubio shows that he supports I don't know who, because it's not the Cubans.
That's such an interesting perspective, and that's why we love having everyone on from different datelines here. We always hear something different. How's this going on in China? How's this going down?
You know, the biggest issue Chinese are having with Trump is China bashing. You know, Trump always says that we're losing to China. He used to say that China, they're committing the greatest theft in world history, the cheaters. You know, this is just the nature of world trade today, right? You know, China only makes 9% of the profit of Apple, and they exported it to the U.S. It counts as Chinese export. So, you know, I agree with my colleague in Cristina in Cuba. That is, you know, Trump does not get to the essentials of the facts right sometimes. But on the other hand, the Chinese love celebrity awareness. Most Chinese love to watch U.S. TV shows. They're big fans of it, trust me. There's even a Trump supporter group on Weibo, China's own Twitter, that I just found out today. You know, people love the fact that he's a successful entrepreneur, and China is very market-driven nowadays, so people really look up to those who can create wealth and be successful.
It's interesting, though, that Chinese people
opinions are really torn.
Are making the difference between a reality TV star and a politician, and not everyone here maybe is going about that. Okay, let's move on, because we don't want Donald Trump to dominate this show like everyone else. Let's talk about the Zika virus and go back to Sam, because the Zika virus has really captured the world's attention. Everyone is extremely worried about it, from the World Health Organization on down. Has Brazil got its hands around this virus yet? And what is the feeling about its links to microcephaly, of course, that birth disorder, which haven't yet been proven, but there's a lot of research there?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking more and more likely every single day that this surge in microcephaly, especially in the northeast of Brazil, is connected to Zika virus. There have been some reports or some theories that this was an underreported phenomenon before. Now, that obviously happens quite often in poorer regions, birth deformities and abnormalities underreported. But yeah, this is an extremely serious situation that we have right now with Zika, especially in the poorer northeastern states of Brazil, Pernambuco, Paraíba, Bahia. These are places which have about a quarter of the capital, the GDP per capita that Sao Paulo does, for example. About 2 weeks ago now, we saw a mass mobilization of soldiers across the country. It was 220,000 soldiers that were going door to door, trying to raise awareness on the Zika virus, and also trying to terminate mosquito breeding sites which create mosquito-borne viruses such as Zika and dengue fever. So it's very difficult to say that Brazil has this under control at the moment, but it seems that they're certainly trying.
And obviously, you mentioned the poorer areas. This kind of exposes how much Brazil still has work to do in terms of combating poverty, the lack of healthcare, especially in the regions that you mentioned. What are they doing long term to try and combat that, given the fact that also we have the Olympics coming, and obviously some worries about athletes, and of course the massive influx of tourists and watchers you're going to have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this epidemic, the Zika epidemic, has really exposed more than ever the huge inequalities that still exist in Brazil. During the last 15 years or so, we've seen millions, tens of millions, in fact, rise out of poverty. But there is still so much inequality in the country. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the northeast of the country. So poor people are more vulnerable to the Zika virus, especially in the northeast of the country, where middle class and rich people are more likely to live in closed apartments with air conditioning, whilst poor people are living in informal housing, which is often open. Now, historically, it's a drought-stricken region, which means that people are more likely to keep water supplies in their backyards, in their back gardens, and a small crack to the water canister can create a perfect mosquito breeding site. Also around in these regions, the healthcare services are historically deprived, as the healthcare services are amongst the worst in the country. We see the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality. So this is a really serious issue in terms of affecting poor people being most affected by this issue and exposing the inequalities that remain in Brazil. Regarding the Olympics, now, the Olympics are taking place just in Rio de Janeiro city, where few growing cases, but few comparatively cases of Zika and microcephaly have taken place, have been recorded, as opposed to the northeast of the country. Now, of course, with every epidemic shadowing a huge tourist event, there will be some impacts, but the authorities and myself too, we believe that this impact is going to be minimal.
Cristina, Havana is known for its healthcare across Cuba. What are the Cubans doing about this regional crisis?
Well, there's a constant battle against the mosquito that transmit this Zika virus. And because we suffer dengue, and so we've been battling with this issue for a lot of years now. And of course, even though none case of Zika virus has been reported in Cuba, there's an increased surveillance over that in airports and in any kind of way in which could be transmitted, taking into consideration that in Cuba, as you know, the healthcare system is free, universal access, so it's not only a human problem because of the health issue, but it's also an economic problem, because if it's an epidemic and it grows, could be quite a problem. Today, there's this massive process of, going through every home to see if people are doing what are supposed to be doing to not have the mosquito. Is the only way to tackle this disease. You can't. There's no vaccines. There's no treatment. All you can do is, creates the conditions in which that mosquito won't grow, won't be transmitted, and won't be alive. So there's quite a movement here, massive movement in Cuba, and a lot of media attention to that in order to create a risk conscience in the population, so people will be involved and will participate. It's the strongest issue that we have here, that the participation of people could make impossible the Zika virus to be transmitted, even though that doesn't mean that in some point that could be an issue, but still there's no case reported here in Cuba.